Hello everyone, and welcome! Today we'll be doing a Transcendence difficulty run with Icy. I'm not going to talk about my tactics or my Mind Crystals too much, since I've been running these same ones for a long time. If you want to see what they are, you can always pause the video and check them. For training preparation, I haven't used this in a whole lot of videos, but with one of the buffs they made to Transcendence difficulty, I like to start with speedrun reward, no damage reward, and then exclude fewer rewards when I do Transcendence runs. This is quite expensive, so if you're still leveling up your Mind Crystals and stuff, or you still have other usages for your AP, I wouldn't really recommend doing it, but if you just have extra laying around, then it is helpful. Because you get 2 shop refreshes from being on 75 entropy, and then they buffed Transcendence to where you get an additional one as well. So it'll be hard to spend the extra money to use for that extra shop refresh, unless you're making more than usual. So I think Toxin tactics overall, which is what we're going to be running today, feel a lot more well-rounded. They feel pretty good overall, especially when it comes to... I think a lot of the stuff on its own, like Venom on its own, isn't really that great, but when you start putting it with red tactics like Lingering Venom and Venomous Bubble, it gets pretty strong. Also, I don't have it shown here in my legacies, but our Venom also got a very strong red tactic that makes... when enemies have the poison debuff on them and get hit by Venom, it constantly reduces the timer of Venom. Or not of Venom, but the regular poison debuff. So that poison debuff from attack poison or skill poison ring is what I mean by the poison debuff. It's still pretty weak against high entropy enemies. Normal enemies, because of just the way that the calculation on the amount of time it's going to take to go off doesn't really work against high HP enemies. I don't have time to explain all that right now, but the basic of it is that poison on normal enemies and high entropy is still pretty weak, even with that new red effect, but now it's quite strong on boss fights. We won't be looking at that one today, but it will most likely be used in a future build. So these 4 things are all stuff you can use to set up this build. We're going to be getting all 4 of them eventually. So you can set them up as a combination of any of these legacy characters that you can see here. Also, these legacy characters work pretty well on their own, too, if you were going to try and run them in other builds. What we're going to be doing today is going to be a little bit silly, and we're going to actually start with 4 red tactics. This is not something I've ever done before on the channel, but there's a couple reasons why I haven't done it, and one reason why I'm more willing to do it now. One of the reasons why I never did this before is it just was not viable to set up consistently in any way. You weren't too likely to see double red tactics with only 1 or 2 legacy tactic refreshes in the past. You'd have to get lucky to be able to see them. And I want to make sure that the videos are something that most players have the ability to replicate themselves. And also, I don't want to rely on a bunch of luck myself in order to set that up for my characters. But anyways, one of the changes they've done to Transcendence recently, Transcendence has got quite a few buffs, so it's more useful to play on now than before. I still don't think it's that great overall, but it's better than it was before, especially when it comes to setting up legacy characters. One of the buffs was that now in Transcendence mode, you gain a lot more refreshes by default for legacy tactics. And then as you increase your entropy, you get even more. So at my entropy, I get around 10 of them. But even at something like 40, I think I was getting 8, which is still a lot. And you can guarantee double red tactics on your legacy characters much more consistently than before. So, what we are going to do first is pick up Skill Venom. It doesn't really matter what order I pick up things, but I want to pick up Skill Venom right now. So, real talk, this is like the 4th time I've tried to record this video. I get so engrossed in my commentary that I try to go quickly through selections like this, and then I've picked up Legacy Venom so many times. Which means that I have to restart the entire run, because I need Legacy Pufferfish in the run. Pufferfish does not have another slot, so if I take Legacy Venom, I can't get Pufferfish anymore, and the run's just over. So let's hope that nothing goes horribly bad this run, like I somehow randomly die early in the run. God forbid. But anyways, back to what I was explaining before. I also just don't really like the concept of running 4 red tactics. I could see maybe starting with, like, 2 on one character, and then running maybe, like, 2 base tactics on another character or something like that. But I've always just kind of had a rule, a general personal rule of, for my legacy characters, I like to set it up with one of the base tactics, and then either a red effect or an upgrade of that base tactic. I always want my legacy tactics to be active at the start of the run. I don't want my legacy tactics to require me to pick up anything specific. Just so you can start the run as a much more powerful character. Icy is honestly fine without any tactics or potentials yet, but some characters struggle more than others when it comes to early combat. And then also I just don't have to worry about any RNG of seeing the right tactics show up during the run. Which, a lot of times, especially if you're running Chance Boost, it's really not that difficult to get the specific tactics that you want, but it's still just a nice consistency thing to have your legacy tactics set up where you start with exactly what you want and need. So the first red tactic that we've picked up is a new one from the new Pufferfish tactic, actually. I've talked about this before, but red tactics only actually have one requirement. In most cases, there are some rare exceptions, but it's not common. You can have a red tactic active without having both of their requirements if you inherit it from a legacy character. So in this case, even though this is technically a Pufferfish tactic on the Pufferfish tactic tree, Skill Venom is all that it actually requires to work properly. So it's active without even having the Pufferfish. That's something that's very important to keep in mind if you want to get in-depth with tactic builds. But for this case, it just lets me pick it up faster. This makes it where Venom will constantly produce extra toxin bubbles when they're down on the ground, which is a new tactic that was added in the recent patch. Toxin bubbles apply a debuff to enemies, and then once they get enough stacks of the debuff on them, they'll actually get lifted into the air. It's going to be a little difficult to show off on purpose right now, but there you go. You can see that enemy just got lifted into the air. I love just how goofy this effect looks visually, and I also really like that it's a tactic that has more visual impact. Because right now, how a lot of the tactics have always felt have always been that they're just kind of a random damage source that comes out and either deals damage themselves for you or gives you extra damage through a buff effect. But this one it does deal some damage, but it's less focused towards damage and more focused towards crowd control. And then I just like that it's a very visually appealing effect that's very noticeable to the character. Like, you really feel the benefit of your tactics when enemies just start randomly flying across the screen. As opposed to something like Frost, where you can feel the bonus DPS, but you don't really have a visual indication of your character becoming stronger that way. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know how much that's a thing that a whole lot of people care about, but it's something that I always like to see in game design. I'm not the type of person that really cares, like, if my damage number goes from 1 to 1,000, but it works the same way mechanically and visually, that doesn't do anything for me at all. I like seeing visual effects where, like, my attack swings get larger, or I'm able to attack with faster speed, that type of stuff. That's more of a visual-based upgrade, and one you can actually kind of feel in your gameplay. Oh, I forgot to use them in my rant there, but we did get a couple other things for the build. And then I think I'm actually going to pick up a spreading Venom before I get Virulent Bomb. Actually, no. I'm just gonna get these now. We're pretty close to the boss fight, so I need to get the reds active. So here's the actual new pufferfish tactic. When you activate your legacy, you get this little cool-looking dude that follows you around. I also like these things just because they're funny-looking and they're neat-looking. But anyways, they follow you around, and then they spawn bubbles constantly. They do the same thing as what I talked about with these bubbles from the red effect. They just debuff enemies, and then when enemies get a certain stack of that debuff on them, they get lifted into the air. What we've also picked up is Pufferfish Toxin Bomb. So now, every time I have one of these Pufferfish active, by the way, I can have 2 active at once if I use both of my legacy tactics, or my legacy skills at the same time. So you can stack 2 of these at the same time. And then these will constantly spawn Virulent Bombs for me. And then Virulent Bombs are also leaving Venom behind. So the Virulent Bombs, either by dashing, will spawn Venom, or now what I can do is I can turn on this effect, I can run around, and it'll spawn bombs all over, and I can very easily fill the entire map with Venom now. And then remember that Venom is also getting buffed by this red tactic, so it's constantly dealing a little bit of extra damage, and it's going to be lifting enemies into the air. So you can see why, in this case, I do really want to stack up to all 4 red tactics very quickly. These 4 red tactics have a lot of synergy with each other. I think I'll go ahead and pick this up. This is one of the important upgrades to look for, just because we're going to be spawning a lot of additional Virulent Bombs, so having a damage increase on them is going to go a long ways. I could have bought the gold tactic in the first shop, but I'm still pretty leery about spending a whole lot of money on tactics in general. I don't know if I even should have bought this Tactic Ascension. But I think I'll go ahead and upgrade the Venom itself. If I am going to spend a whole lot of money on tactics, this might be the run to do it. Icy doesn't need a whole lot of potentials to get going compared to other characters, but potentials are always just going to be extremely valuable. If you didn't know already, there's a 20% damage modifier that your character gets every time you pick up a potential, and this stacks with each one of them. So if I'm at 2 potentials, I'm at 40% damage bonus, and then so forth. This damage modifier, unfortunately, does not apply to tactics at all. So if you're getting a high amount of potentials, a lot of times what'll end up happening is your tactics will, or your character will eventually outscale your tactic damage, even if you have a pretty strong tactic setup with a lot of gold tactics. I don't think Ascensions are quite strong enough for high entropy stuff. Tactics are more than enough for lower entropy gameplay, where the enemy health bars are much lower, but in high entropy, that's where it becomes more of a problem, where your character is able to scale over the course of the run, but your tactics just don't have that same way of scaling as efficiently. So even if I don't need like a whole lot of potentials for the character's moveset to function efficiently in boss fights, I still always need to pick up as many potentials as possible just to increase my character's DPS. So normally I never spend any money on shops outside of potentials. I don't buy extra tactics and I don't buy ascensions usually. Let's take a look at the black market. So this is something I think I mentioned earlier in this run, is that I want my runs to be replicable to other people. So I've never enjoyed taking black markets and covenants and stuff in the past. I tried it out in the last video, and I'll probably try it out here too. So what we're definitely going to be taking is the extra exchange points. Like I said before, spending on the extra additional shop refresh is actually quite expensive throughout the course of the run. It makes a big difference in how many upgrades you can get if you're... especially if you're just spending on tactics like or on potentials like I usually do. If you're buying out other things from the shop on top of potentials, you might not even have enough money to use on the additional refreshes to begin with. Sorry, I like, completely lost my train of thought after I finished that sentence. But, so anyways, what my problem has been... if I'm taking some of these black market effects and covenant effects, I think it can make the run more entertaining from an entertainment perspective. Like, in the last video where I was just, like, completely one-shotting bosses with Kokonoe at the end, and having some strong reactions to them. I think from an entertainment perspective, it's a lot better to go for the black markets and stuff. But from an educational perspective, it gives you a much different outcome of what the build will be if you try to do it on an average run. And I know that, like, I always point out these type of things, like I did in the last video, where I said, hey, if you are playing this build, it's not going to be nearly as strong because I have a huge damage modifier increase on me right now. So it's not misleading in the sense that I'm not telling you that type of thing, but you are still seeing basically a completely different version of the build than what would be typical in a run. And since my primary goal has always been... of course I do want the runs to be entertaining, too. I don't... if they're boring, obviously no one is going to watch them, but my main goal for the runs has always been for educational purposes, to teach people about new tactic builds, and how to play the characters, that type of thing. So I'm kind of like stuck between the two things right now. Whether I want to show off black markets and covenants and stuff more often or not. That's something that if you guys want to weigh in the comments and tell me your opinion of things, that always helps out a lot, just to hear what you guys want. So I do want to make sure I pick up the spreading Venom upgrade here. Since we're going to be having Venom down constantly, and we're be covering pretty much the entire stage with it, we're going to be getting a lot of use out of the cumulative Venom, which is something I've always wanted to use in the past, but it's been hard to get a steady enough stream of Venom out, and enough Venom that the debuff doesn't fall off when the enemies start moving around. So this build will hopefully help out with that type of thing. And then spreading Venom is the only one that actually increases the damage of Venom, so it's what we want. Casting Venom would help out a little bit, but I think we're going to have constant enough streams of Venom coming out that we don't need it. I will give you guys like a heads up that one thing I'm not going to be doing enough in this is actually remembering to use my legacy skills to get the pufferfish, which is going to make a huge difference in how the build looks. The build's so much better if you actually remember to use these properly. I feel like I've just sort of been conditioned for so long not to really touch my legacy skills outside of boss fights. Legacy skills have a similar issue to what I talked about with tactics earlier, where they don't scale off the damage modifier that you're getting from potentials, and they don't scale off of other damage modifiers. So once you get into high entropy, they're just not very useful. Unless they have some other usage to them, like Ragna's second legacy giving you a heal, Noel's second legacy giving you MP back, that type of thing. They're just not very useful outside of either putting enemies into some hit stun or having some other kind of buff effect. I'm kind of surprised... Well, there we go. We finally have the last tactic we need to activate the final red tactic. So now, we'll have yet another way to get more Venom. Slime generates Venom upon landing, inflicting 140 damage every 0.5 seconds. So just whenever our slimes hit something, they generate Venom. Whenever our virulent bombs explode, they generate venom, and then when we have pufferfishes on, they'll constantly generate virulent bombs, which also generate venom. And that's how this whole build works. It spawns as much venom as possible, and then it also buffs the venom a little bit with the venomous bubbles. I don't think the venomous bubbles really add up to a lot of damage in boss fights, but what they do in normal rooms is that they help crowd control enemies for you. So if I don't kill enemies I need to damage some enemies, otherwise Ragna's second legacy is going to drain me too much. We can see that we go completely wild now with how much of the map we're constantly covering in Venom, and then everything that is covered by Venom, enemies are constantly getting lifted off the ground. They can't attack during that time, and a lot of times when they fall to the ground, they'll take fall damage. And fall damage is actually pretty useful in this game. It's not something you see too often, but it is something that deals a lot of damage when it does happen. Now, we kind of ran into an issue now of there's so many of the bubbles being spawned constantly that enemies are just getting chained. As soon as they get close to the ground, they get lifted again, and they're not taking the fall damage. But being able to have them in constant crowd control is honestly quite strong in its own. So let's see. There are still a couple more potentials I want, so I'm gonna not buy any more tactics or ascensions for now. Man, I didn't get a single potential out of that shop. So let's see how well this does against the boss fight. I need to attack a little bit here, otherwise Ragna's health thing is going to just drain me. But I want to let the tactics hit for the most part. You can see that they're doing decent damage. It's not like high DPS by any means, but the damage is contributing decently significantly to how fast the boss is dying. Well, when I say that, it was the only thing contributing there, but I meant compared to how much damage my character would be doing. The tactic damage is at least reasonable, in my opinion, for Transcendence difficulty. If you're playing on non-Transcendence mode, and then especially if you're playing on lower entropies, even below Transcendence, having to worry about tactic damage isn't something that's nearly as big of an issue. Tactics are way more balanced around not having high enemy HP from entropy settings and stuff. But if you're playing on Transcendence or you're playing on high entropy, that's where things get a lot worse for tactics. I don't know if I really care about any of these a whole lot. I guess I'll just take the damage reduction for a little bit of extra safety. I can't remember if I talked about it this run, or if it was one of the previous failed attempts that I've tried. Like I said before, this is like my 5th attempt in a row of recording this. One time I died early just to some random stuff that I really shouldn't have died to. That one was my fault. But then the other runs were just me trying to do too many things at once and accidentally taking Legacy Venom and not being able to get Pufferfish after that. So anyways, I don't remember if I went over this before or not, but The potentials I look for when I'm playing Icy, one of them is on screen right here, where Uppercut deals, or where you unlock the Uppercut move. It gives you a hidden effect where your down attack will deal additional hits, and it's, for some reason, the amount of damage that the down attack, or the down air attacks do with this hidden effect is just completely insane. You'll basically just start one-shotting normal enemies once you get it. And then the other upgrades for this up attack will also buff your down attack as well, so those are good to look for. Electron Flow is another good one. It unlocks a lot of useful tools for you to use early on. Electron Flow I'm kind of not liking as much as I used to until... It's still very good, but there's a certain hidden effect you need with it, or maybe it might be the ability to charge. That's something I'll have to look into during this run. But there's some way that you can make it where they attack more instantly without having a delay. They're really good after that. Before that, they're not quite as good. And then other things I like to look for on Icy are, you want to get the increased MP recovery here, and then the increased MP recovery from Universal Enhancement. That'll activate the hidden effect you can see, where you increase your MP recovery efficiency to the max. Once you get the MP recovery unlocked, it'll make a lot of things for Icy a lot more smooth. If you're unfamiliar with how Icy works, he doesn't regen MP over time like the rest of the characters in the cast do. Instead, she gets MP based on hitting enemies, so having the extra MP recovery for her goes a long ways in her playstyle. It's almost similar to Hazama if you play him, where getting his passives that affect his MP recovery rate, or in his case it's a MP refund on hit, but it's the same kind of concept. The earlier you're able to get those things set up, the smoother your run is going to be. Especially because Icy gets a... I think a lot of her skill effects aren't actually very good, especially in comparison with her heavy attack. So again, unlike most characters, Icy's heavy attack is actually considered to be a skill in terms of if you take things like skill damage from Mind Crystals, or you have something like Skill Frost. They also cost MP, but they're her main damage source. Her down airs do a lot of damage as well, you can see, but in terms of both just the range and the overall damage, her heavy attacks are probably her strongest tool in her kit. And then you always want to be doing the heavy attacks in the air as well. You never really want to use the grounded version unless you have some of the... unless you have the SP version of it. Okay, that's a little bit annoying, but he finally died. So here is something that, when we go into the next boss fight, we should be able to do even more DPS with the tactics, because this will be stacking up constantly as long as the Venom keeps managing to hit him, or hit the boss. Which, with the Venom being able to spread out so efficiently, I think that should be... it should be a lot more viable now than it was before. Before, you'd always have where the bosses move around so often that a lot of times the stack damage will fall off, because it needs to keep hitting an enemy constantly enough, otherwise it'll just remove that extra damage buff you're getting. So back to Icy a little bit. The reason why you don't use heavy attack on the ground is that it has an extra animation. It's so much slower. So for slimes, we want to be picking up the upgrade where they last longer, just so they have more chances to spread the venom around. I think also, well, it says upon landing, so I don't know what exactly the game means by that, but I would assume that the extra attack speed would make them spawn a little bit more venom as well. Either way, the lasting slime is the main thing that will allow them to be out longer and create a lot more venom. I'll show it off here. If I used grounded, you can see just how long the animation is for it. Compared to if I use it in the air, it comes out instantly. And then there, I did let, like, the entire animation play out as well, but you can instantly, since the move comes out right away, you can dash or do another attack or something in order to get out of that ending animation too. Which you can do with the grounded version, but as you can see right there, I can probably show it again a little bit easier if I get a potential here. The game just really wants me to have ascensions and stuff, not want to give me potentials. I might pick up I'll pick up 1 HP increase. And then, of course, I ruined my ability to buy a potential here. I should have just not bought the HP. I should have waited. Whatever. I don't think I'm making very good use of my black market effect here either. Otherwise, I would have had a lot more money for that shop. It's a lot harder to perfect clear stages while I'm doing commentary. I play much worse overall on commentary. That's pretty much just something that's to be expected, though. So unfortunately, I mentioned something about, now that we have cumulative Venom, the Venom damage is going to be able to stack up throughout the boss fight. And then we got the one boss, of course, that flies in the air and can't be hit by Venom. Oops. I always forget that that swing is an overhead. Also, a lot of the virulent bombs aren't able to damage right here either, so our damage output is going to be really rough for this boss fight. Icy herself is really good at attacking aerial enemies, so she has the capability of damaging this boss easily enough, but I don't really have... This build isn't focused on really increasing Icy's DPS, so a lot of it's going to be coming from the tactics. Either way, it wasn't that bad of a boss fight. It was just a lot slower than it could have been. The virulent bombs and the venom there do hit they do hit the tentacles as they're spawning on the ground, which is one way you can deal with that boss if you don't have a good way to attack aerial enemies. You just hit the tentacles as they spawn, but overall, they weren't getting a whole lot of damage output from that fight. Oh, I can't take this. This would be so good with the virulent bombs, but I will just kill my damage output if I do this. When it says greatly reduced, it just almost means that your attacks of that type will do almost no damage. It's a really, really harsh debuff onto them. This might not be awful. We don't have high HP, and we probably won't be able to stack too much of it. But this debuff isn't that bad for Icy since she's able to gain MP so efficiently. And then... No, that's it, actually. I was gonna say that there was more to that, but there wasn't. Maybe taking this debuff was a mistake. I do this every time with this debuff. I'm like, it won't be that bad. I can just get the MP back, and then I go into a room, and by muscle memory, I start trying to use my skills right away, and I'm just like, never mind, this feels awful to play with. I'm the type of person that plays very heavily off of muscle memory, so having something like this feels pretty bad for me to play around. I need to not die. There's definitely always a constant threat on Transcendence difficulty. Like there, I think I only took 2 hits, given that they were... At least one of them was like the very powerful swing effect from the samurai-looking dudes, so those are obviously going to deal very heavy damage, but I almost died in just a couple of hits there. Part of that is because I have lower HP from Black Market, but Transcendence difficulty is just extremely punishing, especially when it comes to the later parts of the run. So now, I've mostly been, like, giving a lot of praise to the new Pufferfish effect that lifts enemies. I like that it's not just damage, it's crowd control, and it's more of a... It's a more visually appealing effect than a lot of the tactics, in my opinion. But now we're kind of seeing an issue that I have with it. I don't want either of these upgrades. I want the other upgrade for it. This one. This one just allows the bubbles to stack more quickly, basically, so enemies get lifted sooner. And then we can pick up attack. I don't think I really want to. I could go for attacks, and then I could go for Venom enhancement. Oh no. This is the red effect that I was talking about before, though, where if you want to go for a poison build with the debuff, you want to look for Venom enhancement. That'll make it a lot better. Where's the tactic that I want? The tactic that you could run with this and make it into a 5 red build is Poison Virulent Bomb. Which... I can take just the poison, but if I do that, it won't be very effective. Poison isn't very effective without having, like, the extra potency and the acute poison. So what I was thinking is I would maybe just take the one poison thing and not upgrade it, and then get Poison Virulent Bomb. But I think I'm just not going to bother at all. Poison isn't going to be happening enough that Poison Virulent Bomb is going to be going off often enough. And I get 80 for every tactic that I resell at this point. So I would rather just make extra money than have a final addition to the build that's not going to be nearly as valuable as the rest of it. So yeah, what I started talking about is for how good, or for how much I like the poison bubble, or the new pufferfish bubbles, they can be a little bit annoying. And part of this is, I'm kind of like Hang on. I need to not die again. That was... that was very close to being run ending. It still is, but I need to turn on Ragna's Legacy, and then... There we go. Okay, that actually did help us there. The slimes were able to put the debuff on them from off-screen and let me get into range safely. Let me try to still heal back up to full. I don't have MP. There's a pretty good example of what I wanted to say. Let me finish this room and then I'll say it though. Okay, so yeah, it was very prevalent there. And it's kind of almost my own fault. It's more of a suffering from success moment, where I have so much of the... I have so much of these active at the same time from Venomous Bubble that enemies are being lifted into the air almost too often, especially because they're getting their fall damage canceled by either slimes hitting them on the ground or them getting lifted an additional time. And then also, if I was playing some other characters that weren't good at aerial combat, like god damn, I am taking really dumb random hits this run. Was that but I can't tell if that was a hit from Intermittent Thunder, or if it was just the effect of that enemy, because they have an effect that looks similar. But that did like half my health almost, it looked like. But yeah, if you're playing some other characters and the enemies are getting lifted this constantly, and you don't have a good way of hitting them out of the air, it can cause some real issues. Because the bubbles don't actually deal that much damage while the enemies are being lifted. Most of the damage comes from fall damage that they take. But if you do have a character that can hit into the sky pretty easily, then the bubbles are a very, very strong source of crowd control for you. So I don't think they're strictly bad. It's just sometimes they can get a little too good at what they do almost. Where, like I said, at this point, I'm at the point of where enemies are getting lifted constantly, and they could be difficult to hit if I wasn't playing Icy. By the way, what I was just doing there is something that's really good to talk about for high entropy runs in particular, but it applies to anything as well. Since I was in such a dangerous HP value there, I want to focus on taking stuff like events, shops, sortitions. Those type of spaces don't require combat at all, and any space you do will always progress the stage counter. So even if you had like 8 rooms of shops, you would still find the boss room on the 9th. So there's no downside in terms of like HP resources. It's easy to save on HP if you're going through those types of rooms. And then another big one is that it saves on your timer if you have entropy settings where you can run out of time limit. Now, there is a downside to doing this as well. You won't be getting any exchange points if you're doing this, and you'll be missing out on... Sometimes events can give you sometimes events can give you potentials, I mean, but sortichos can't give you any potentials. Events are pretty rare. So if you're overly indulging on non-combat spaces, it will be a detriment. but they're good as like an emergency tool if you're running out of time or you're suddenly really low on HP. It's just something you have to consider risk versus reward for. This upgrade will help out a lot for any pufferfish stuff you're running. I kind of wish I would have gotten it earlier, but I'm probably forgetting to use them half the time anyways, so it's fine. But 6 seconds is just a huge increase on it. They have a base of 10, depending on... Actually, I think this one's always 10 seconds regardless of rarity, but this one does increase based on rarity. Either way, having an additional 4+ seconds from this bonus will help out a lot. Another thing that I always try to mention during videos, especially now that we're talking about stage selections, when you're at stage 8, you'll always have a guaranteed exchange space. So that's something you can keep in mind. You can always wait till the end to spend your money. I said the boss was on stage 9, but it's actually on stage 10. I just said that wrong. So I could look for some of the Overload upgrades. The SP version of Overload isn't very good, and I mentioned this briefly before when talking about it, but if you're using the aerial version of Overload, you don't get the SP version. You have to specifically use the ground version. You can see down here, it finally spent the SP. If I use it in the air, it doesn't spend it. If you watch the icon again, now it's spent. The damage bonus that you get out of spending the SP isn't that high. It's decent, but you have to be more careful when you're using it because of that extra animation. And then also, if you do it improperly, you can dash cancel out of this one too, like you can with the aerial version. You just have to make sure you don't do it too early, or you can cancel the move. Whereas with the air version, you can dash cancel out of it, or you can cancel it with an attack. As soon as the heavy attack starts, you can cancel it. So Icy can really get into a state of where a lot of her moves are very, very fast to dash cancel or jump cancel or cancel with your attacks. She can attack very quickly if you get used to this type of thing. I do like having this upgrade. I might not remember to use it a whole lot since I'm doing commentary, but this is something I normally like to have when I'm playing Icy. And then there's another one I would like to see. Getting both of these would be nice because it gives invincibility. I think you need... I can check, actually. You just need the SP version that you unlock here, and then I can just go ahead and pick it up, actually. The other thing I'm looking for isn't that big of a deal. And then we need to look for... Well, this is the other thing I wanted now. I wanted the hold version of Electron Flow stuff. So here's another thing I talked about earlier. Electron Flow moves normally, like this one especially, has quite a big delay on it when you use it. But once you unlock this hidden effect where the moves can be held, not only do you have that new held version of it, but it pretty much completely reduces any delay on Electron Flow moves. So if I select another potential, and I do the same exact move, you can see it has this huge startup time on it. Not all of the moves have a lot of startup time on them, but all of the moves get much faster, basically, once you pick up the held version of them. I'll go ahead and probably just search for the invincibility upgrade that I'm looking for Overload, which is the heavy attacks. With the way that I've been playing today, that's probably the safer option. Come on, I saw it earlier, and now that I'm trying to re-roll for it, I'm just not getting it, apparently. Really? There we go. It's the invincibility for integration that you want to get if you want to make your heavy attacks invincible. Alright, I was hoping to maybe get some free heals off the shop there, but unfortunately I wasn't lucky, so I'll have to play this a little bit safe and also rely on Ragna Second Legacy. I don't have MP, though. It's really... Oh, what? This is weird. I do not like that. Luckily, I think my slimes or something might have interrupted her there before she got her attack off. Let me just fight this boss and try to do commentary at the same time. I don't want to lose the run. Okay. That fight really wasn't that hard once I was able to start getting some freezes off on her, but that's one of the fights that if things start going wrong and you start to kind of lose your rhythm of things, it goes very bad very quickly. Especially in Transcendence and with as low of HP that I have. I can't believe I did that at the beginning of the fight, though. She was going off-screen to do her, like, dive move, and then what happened was I went to one of the Lysis marks, so I teleported off-screen with her, and just had no idea of where I was. I probably could have still, like, saved it, and not got hit there, but I was just kind of panicking. I don't feel like farming the entire Omega sector or Alpha sector today, but I wouldn't mind picking up a little HP and then maybe a little bit of exchange points. I guess one thing I should mention about a pufferfish build is that if you want the pufferfish bubbles to deal more damage, there is a red tactic with burning that makes it where enemies take constant burning damage while they're in the bubbles. I didn't really feel like the damage from it was that significant, but it's something you could try out. Especially if you're having an issue, a similar issue to me right now, where the enemies are getting lifted so often that it's actually becoming a little bit difficult to hit them. If I wasn't playing a character like Icy that had such good aerial mobility and aerial attacks. That's one reason why I played Icy for this video, is that, for one, she does really well in the early game, even without potentials or tactics, and then also she doesn't have too hard of a time hitting enemies that are lifted in the air. Some other characters that are fun to use with this are Hazama, you can either throw your chains up to enemies while they're up in the air, and you can get high into the sky that way. And then you can do stuff like his aerial up plus skill kick in order to kick them out of the sky. Rachel can also do some pretty funny shenanigans. If you have any of her wind effects and enemies are in bubbles, they'll get constantly blown around by it. But overall, I think this build is very fun to use. I like I like that there's a new mechanic involved in it, where enemies are getting lifted often, and then normally if you don't go so hard into all the red tactic stuff to get an abundance of Venom spawning, that is also spawning the bubbles, the lifting effect is almost a little bit more useful because it's causing enemies to take fall damage constantly. And fall damage is actually quite strong in this game. So in terms of normal enemy rooms, after playing around with it a little bit more, I feel like I've almost made it worse as a tactic. But for boss fights, having all of the Venom everywhere is going to be a huge benefit to the DPS, since Venom is able to stack in damage throughout the course of the fight through the accumulative Venom upgrade for it. And then also Virulent Bombs are dealing quite a lot of damage on their own. If I remember correctly, if you wanted to put the burn red effect in for the pufferfish effect, you would have to drop the Virulent Bombs because it's a dash slot tactic, which would hurt the bossing DPS quite a lot. And then you would have less Venom as well, which I don't think would matter quite as much. Man, I have no exchange points at all. Am I just not really... I must not be activating Perfect Harvest very often. Let's try it one more room. I want to see how much exchange points I get out of it. And hopefully I just won't take damage. I know part of the problem is that you don't make a whole lot of money in rooms unless they're an actual exchange point space. But even then, I feel like my money's really low. There's another build for Toxic Tactics that I'm really looking forward to showing off in the future as well. But it might be a while since I don't want to show two of the same elements in a row. It's another thing you can do with Virulent Bombs, and then the new Venom red effect. I got basically no exchange points from that. And I should have perfect cleared it. I didn't look, though, actually, which I should have. I don't know if I should have entered this. My time is really low, too. I'm just kind of off today in terms of... I'm not playing as well as usual, and I'm not paying enough attention to stuff like my timer. Been kind of like that for the last few days. I don't know what's going on. I feel like a little bit sick, but it's nothing... I don't feel too bad, like I don't feel real sick or anything. But anyways, the other build that I've been enjoying for Toxin revolves around the red tactic that I showed earlier, where anytime an enemy is hit by Venom, they get the timer for a poison debuff reduced on them, and then you run a similar thing with virulent bombs and slimes that create Venom. And then what you'd run for the attack slot is you would run attack poison. And then since you always have Venom down, your attacks are... Since you always have Venom down, you're getting the reduction from poison constantly, and it's able to activate on boss fights very quickly. And then what you do is you go for poison virulent bombs. So you're pretty much rapid-firing off both the poison damage itself and then virulent bombs. And the virulent bombs that get spawned from this way deal much more damage than normal ones, too. So you get a lot of damage out of it that way. Okay, so I guess let's just go into this exchange and see if we can get maybe one more potential. Of course not. I could refresh here just to see what's on discount. I guess I'll just buy a little bit of extra HP, though, for safety. I don't have the potential that increases the attack speed of my electron flow, which is quite a problem, especially for muscle memory purposes. But I can't reduce any more timer. Even as it is now, I'm probably going to run out of time limit when I fight this. And then there's no way I can fight this, just due to time and how dangerous that boss is on Transcendence mode. I'm going to see what's on sale here, just because I might as well. Alright then. So we're going to go into the Susano fight now. I'm not going to do a commentary for it. I like to focus for that fight, especially because of the new... If you haven't seen it yet, he has new attacks on Transcendence. He's much, much more difficult than before. So I'll get a certain song ready. I like this song as a kind of a theme for Susano. Ah well, it is what it is. I'm not that surprised that I lost that one with the way I've been playing today. I still think it was a pretty fun run overall, and it's mostly what I'm concerned about is just showing off the new tactics and new tactic builds, so I don't really care if I win or lose. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.